Good morning and welcome to Friday with the Rev. I'm Greg Johnson. I'm the president and CEO of GJP International, and I'm here to share with you in this continuing series a discussion about family caregiving, faith, and spirituality. It's a joy to have you with us this morning and to have the opportunity of sharing these thoughts on family caregiving. And I'm going to begin this morning with a prayer that I have only recently written. And I want us to be thinking of all of the caregivers. Perhaps we're talking about you, but the family caregivers all over the world, carers to most of us. And I'm very pleased to share with you that we have a number of brand new folks joining us. Some people who will be coming to me in Bali in a few weeks, actually, to have the opportunity while I'm in Bali to talk about caring, family caregiving in their particular country. So we welcome all of you, each and every one, those of you who have been with us from the beginning and those of you who join us today. And that's an appropriate phrase to say because the title of this prayer is Where Two or Three Are Gathered. So take just a moment and let us unite all over the world, and we are all over the world, as together we remember that where two or three are gathered, we are promised that God, the divine, whatever way, whatever word works for you today, wherever two or three are gathered, that presence is with us. Where two or three are gathered together, I will be there in the midst of them. Thank you, precious Lord, for this promise and assurance. This phrase evokes not only organized worship of many variations, but for me as a family caregiver, a carer, it makes me grateful for support groups, in person or online. In these times of focus, sharing, listening, and sharing again, I realize that truly we are one. And that is pieces, my fellow caregivers, and pieces that put us all back together. Pieces of you and pieces of me put us all back together by your grace. I thank you for your grace, which comes to me as I participate in my support groups. We are gathered in one place with one accord, and your spirit renews, refreshes, revitalizes, and regenerates us all. And I give thanks. Bless each family caregiver and lead those feeling overwhelmed and alone to seek support and the love of others. Each a vessel of your love and blessing, each a messenger of your divine creation and presence. We are not alone. As our spirits unite with one another, then we join with you, O Father, Mother God. We relax, we renew, and we are refreshed. Then with gratitude and joy, we go on our way in your strength always. And it is so with thanksgiving. Amen. Over the years, one of the most interesting things that has constantly occurred in my work in family caregiving, and it's now going on about 20 years since I was first invited to create the Care for the Caregiver Care for the Family Caregiver. I'll learn it yet. Care for the Family Caregiver at Emblem Health. Always in speaking to groups of people, and it's something I want to talk about this morning. It's very important, and probably I would say one of the most important pieces of family caregiving. And we mustn't forget it as we get further and further in the journey, as we speak to new persons, as we speak to persons who have just joined in. You see, many times I've taught classes where I've had people at Emblem and in other places. They've come and they've taken the class because they thought, well, I should know something about this. And we must remember, we never go to school for family caregiving. It is something we live into. We see wonderful examples of it, but we don't really look at it as something that we tend to study or is taught anywhere. And so as I have done classes, there have been times when people will come, and I know they're coming just to find out what this is about. But a year later, they return. Tears, frustration, they're in the middle of it. And so it's always, always important that we never assume that the things that are the most basic of family caregiving, that people understand. Family caregiver or carer. Carer, as you know, is the word that is used throughout most of the world. We in America use the word family caregiver. It is the third leg of the healthcare stool. And all over the world, that's the same. There are three legs to healthcare. One leg, someone who is ill, someone who is suffering physically, emotionally, or spiritually. And as we know, that usually means all three areas, for they interact, of course. So the care recipient. Then the professional caregiver, from the highest paid doctor to the very underpaid home care attendants. Those are professional caregivers. They're people who are being paid to care. And they're wonderful people, and we need them. But the third leg is the area in which I have been blessed to focus, and it has been very much my ministry for the last 20 years, and I think will see me out. And that is the unpaid family caregiver. Too often, the silent patient. And so we need to name all three. And in fact, one of the talks that I frequently give, and I'm only doing a bit of it here, but I think it's extremely important for us every now and then to review this, as well as to share it with new people who are coming in and joining us. One of the most important things is to name it and know its many faces. Name it. Thank you for being a family caregiver. Thank you for being a carer. Thank you for the work you're doing as a family caregiver. It identifies the role. It helps people to know that there are words, that there is help, and when they go to Google and to find help, they will know the words to use to Google. But they're only going to know that if you tell them about it. Now, from a very practical standpoint, many of you know that I have been privileged to serve at the Marble Collegiate Church here in New York City for many years. And doing Prayer Circle, one of the things that I have done, like many faith traditions, and this is not something that's solely Christian by any means, but faith groups come together to pray for those who are ill, people who have requested prayers. And one of the ways that I've helped to integrate and to bring to life the word family caregiver is after we have prayed for the many people for whom prayers have been requested. I then include prayers for their professional caregivers, meaning the doctors, the nurses, the therapists, the aides, all of the professionals, and we pray for the family caregivers, both family of origin and family of choice. Now, with that, there is a second piece. We need to name it and know its many faces. Very often, as I'm talking about family caregivers, immediately the person to whom I'm speaking will begin telling me the story of how they cared for grandma and grandpa, or how they are doing that presently. The focus tends to be on the senior for whom they are providing care. And that is one face of family caregiving. Now, that's not wrong. Frankly, when I was invited to create this program at Emblem, the truth is I immediately went to my grandparents who were long dead, but that's where my thinking went. Now, as we've journeyed, we've come to see that there are many many faces of family caregiving. And it's important for us to understand that, because as we're working with family caregivers, as we are a family caregiver, it's important to know the many pressures, the many faces that are indeed upon us. For a long time, people talked about the sandwich generation, meaning that you were here and you were caring for someone older and perhaps parenting someone younger. And that was the sandwich generation. Well, now with medicine as it is and longevity increasing constantly, frankly, we're in the club sandwich generation. And so for just a few moments this morning, I want to share with you some of the most common faces of family caregiving, because it will help each of us to appreciate each person who is a family caregiver in the world in which they are involved. Now, of course, the first is caring for a senior. I'm one, many of you are, and people care for seniors. But equally true, and hugely here in America, are seniors caring for seniors. As longevity continues, I'm in my 70s. That used to be old. Well, today I'm happy to say that's old, and then there are old. Those who are living to be 100. My mother's going on 97. I'm caring for her, along with my sister. So it's two seniors caring for another senior. So that's the face. It is also seniors raising grandchildren, or intergenerational, and that sociologically is referred to as kinship. New York is one of the leaders in that world. We have an organization, Presbyterian Senior Services, now referred to as PSS, that long ago took the Bronx, one of our 5 boroughs, as an area in which they were doing mission work. And that sounds strange, but not from the time when it was begun, because the Bronx is an incredibly wonderful place. But the work that they have done has been quite outstanding. They have many senior centers that they were working with, providing wonderful recreation, guidance, health care, programming for seniors in the Bronx. But they had a piece of land, and a very brilliant gentleman who is very passionate, very loving, a deeply committed Christian, kept looking at that piece of land, and he kept looking at the people who were in the senior center. And he realized that many of those seniors were raising grandchildren, and there was a definite need for housing. And so they built the grandparent family home. And people from all over the world have come to study this model, because when it was built, most of the children, it was considered a great success if they graduated from high school. Today, every child that graduates high school goes on to college. In fact, there are 2 who have gone into sociology and have returned to work in that center. So if you're interested in that kinship and in that sort of model, go to the computer and look up PSS, Grandparent Home. You will be blessed, and you will know that it has been replicated. And I'm asked of it many, many times as I travel the world speaking on family caregiving. Now, in this day and age, it's long-distance caregiving. That doesn't surprise us. Many from Asia, the young people, have come to the West. Others have gone east. Others have gone many, many places. But it tends to be, in this case, that often families who are caring for someone are being assisted by people who are living at a greater distance. So it becomes important for us not only to know what's available to us where we live, but also to know what is available elsewhere. And that's where the wonders of technology come into play. But it is another face of family caregiving that requires a clock so that you can do communications at times appropriate to both of you. End-of-life issues in the middle of life. The AIDS crisis probably taught that to us more than anything. Those of us who were here, those of us who lived through that very horrible period, remember only too well. It was indeed end of life, in the middle of life. And those sorts of issues do continue. It may not always be AIDS, but there are other issues, and it is another face of family caregiving. Chronic conditions. Chronic conditions know no age. And that too adds to the world of family caregiving. Now here's one that we don't often think of, but children as family caregivers. In a house that's filled with addiction, frequently without knowing it, the children become the caregivers to the parents until they're blessed to have help and to have recovery. And we need to be sensitive to that, sensitive to the fact that these children may not get to school on a given day because they woke up and instead of finding a loving household with a breakfast and lunch prepared for them, actually, mommy and daddy had come home just a few hours before and were both so strung out that they've now passed out. And the child, not knowing that this is not normal, attempts to normalize it and to take care of another brother, sister, whatever it might be. Now, when that child returns to school, and the teacher says, "You weren't here yesterday," that child doesn't know to say, or have the comfort and confidence to say, "Unfortunately, I live in a house filled with addiction," or a dysfunctional family. Those aren't words part of that child's vocabulary. That's not where they are. But that is a huge part of caregiving. And I urge you, if you're in the teaching profession, to be very aware of this situation. It's far more common than is talked about. Another world that we have spent time with and invited and learned and studied is the world of veterans. Sadly, the wounds of today's wars are not the wars of the past. And frankly, there are two areas of family caregiving that do give us knowledge, give us information, give us guidance in dealing with the caregiver and the veteran. And those two are really, I've just spoken about one, the chronic conditions, because many of the wounds are chronic conditions. But the other area is kinship, because often the grandparents or another generation steps in to deal with the children while the spouses care one for the other. This is another face of family caregiving. Of course, disease specific. And we could go on and on. Probably the greatest gift, and this is a difficult word to use, but the greatest gift from Alzheimer's disease is their incredible work on family caregiving. Because there is not a cure. There is only caring. There's a lot of research going on and all of that, and I'm not here to speak about that. But the focus on family caregiving within the Alzheimer's Association has taught many other diseases to understand how very important caring is to the entire family. So there is another face of family caregiving. And recently I've become involved thanks to a project that occurred in Jakarta 2 years ago when President Obama addressed the diaspora of Indonesia. I had the pleasure of being part of that event and am working with Imam Shamsi Ali on a book about the diaspora and family caregiving. It's long distance caregiving, but in a very special sense, because these are people who have gone off to work in other places, and it's not just the Indonesian diaspora, but I'm using that as the focal point because the Indonesians have done a wonderful job on organizing their diaspora. And these are wonderful people who have gone off to do wonderful work, who have been incredible ambassadors for their country, have educated people about their country. But they are also family members. And they can't go home for the weekend. I can fly to Wisconsin and take care of my mother. They can't do that. It takes the weekend to get there. So through technology, how can they be part of the caregiving team back in their home country and yet feel part of that so that they can continue the very vital work that they are doing. Now, there are just two other areas that I want to mention to you because they're quite unique. And one of them is family caregiving. Family caregiving done by a person who is also being cared for. Because frequently, a caregiver may be caring for another person. And the stress and the burden and the age and life and everything that goes with life can suddenly make them equally a care recipient. And we need to be aware of that. This is why this was one of the areas that really interested me when I first began this. Because while I didn't know a great deal about the medical end of family caregiving, what I did know, and that was as a minister, I had buried more caregivers than care recipients. And frequently it is this group of caregivers that was simply overlooked. They were known as the caregiver. Oh yes, they have a few problems. Well, they had big problems. They had life-threatening problems. And because of the caregiving issues, they were not dealing with them. And one last one, because I want you to know of this. A couple of years ago, up at Fordham University, I did a program with their criminology department. And a fantastic film was done, and I can't remember the name of it. But it was about caregiving within the most difficult prisons in America, where prisoners were caring for prisoners. And all I can say is it was the redemptive power of family caregiving. Incredible lives changed, incredible caring, incredible love. And when I can think of the name, I promise I will put it on Facebook for you. I know someone will send it to me today, and I'm very grateful for that. So this morning, it's been a little bit of a different broadcast, but I wanted very much for us to look at that big picture of family caregiving and realize all the faces that are there. Because for that one caregiver that you may be dealing with, and you consider them caring for person A, they may indeed have person B and C and D. And you will notice that I did not talk about parenting, which is probably the greatest of caregiving. But because there are so many resources and there is so much information available, over the years, we have chosen not to specifically include parenting within our conversations about family caregiving, but it is very much part of the entire picture. And in order to be useful and helpful, we need to understand that full picture and understand where that caregiver is and where you may be involved in it as well. Now, I want to thank you for being with me this morning. If you'd like to reach me through the Emblem Health mail, gjohnson@emblemhealth.com, or Marble Church, Greg G. Johnson at marblechurch.org. Thank you so much for being with me this morning. God bless. Thank you for caring, and thank a caregiver today. God bless, and I'll see you next week, Friday, with the Rev. Bye-bye.